Hello again everyone. Today I will be doing a light calc tutorial on the light calculator that I use. This was suggested by a subscriber of mine. Their name is Saju, so thank you very much for suggesting me to do a tutorial on light calc. As everyone knows that watches my channel, this is the online calculator that I go to formulate all my recipes, and I thought that yes, it would be a great idea when Saju suggested me to do a tutorial, because I've seen tutorials for other like online calculators, but I don't think, I mean there could be, I haven't watched every video on YouTube, but from what I could see I don't think I've ever seen one from light calc. So I thought I'll just go ahead and show everyone how I use that calculator and how easy it is to use that calculator, and hopefully you'll pick it up quite quick. And I tried to cover every possible angle. It's very intuitive, so I didn't cover everything that's on the light calculator, but I covered the most important things that I think most people that are formulating a recipe would use, and the settings that they would use, and the additives that they might use outside of clays and fragrance oils or essential oils. I recorded the tutorial in 1080p high definition, so if you have trouble viewing it on your mobile, which I don't think you should, but just in case, just open the video up on a desktop computer or a laptop or a tablet where it's a larger screen, but I'm pretty sure it should be okay on a mobile device. So let's get right into it. This is the light calculator that I prefer to use, as previously showed in all my other videos and in the links in description. I just find it just really intuitive, very straightforward, and my favorite bit, as mentioned before as well, is you can adjust light purity, and as we've known in my previous videos, you can't get sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide at 100% light purity. So we'll get to that in a second. So here are all your carrier oils on the top, and let's just, you can click the search bar here, and obviously my two favorite oils, olive and coconut. So let's go olive oil, or just put olive, you don't have to type in the whole thing. And then you go olive oil, all grades. So this covers refined and extra virgin olive oil. So we add. And then let's say coconut oil is the next one. So coconut oil virgin and 76 degrees. From my calculations, they have the same SAP value, so it doesn't really matter. But just for argument's sake, let's just put coconut oil 76 degrees. And then here you go weight unit. So this is your oil weight. And you obviously select whether it's gram, ounce and pound. Obviously I'm in Australia. I use the metric system, so that's going to be grams, and you can leave that as is, and I'll get to that in a second. Light purity for sodium hydroxide, the particular one I use is 99%, so I'll go ahead and type in that, and I leave 5% as it is because that's what I want, and that's the default oil percentage of oil weight for water, but I changed that to 25 because I heavily discount mine. And you can use these here, water to lye ratio, lye concentration and water discount percentage, so whichever one you're familiar with, but I always go to percentage of oil weight because that's how I calculate all my additives as well, so I find it really straightforward just to keep that consistent with how I calculate all my other additives in my cold processed soap recipe. So I'll leave that as is. Then we go up to the top here. So you can, if you know your oil weight total, let's say 1000 grams, and I want 70% olive oil, then I do 700 grams, and then 300 grams of coconut oil. And then when you scroll down, it shows it here, olive oil, 700 grams, coconut oil, 300 grams, required sodium hydroxide, 99% purity, 5% superfat, 142.31 grams. The amount of water at 25% of oil weight, 250 grams. And over here it says total oils 1000, just to double check. And it shows you your soap weight pre-cook. And that's if you decide to go the hot process method. So that's why it shows pre-cook. And then down here, it says for advanced soap makers. So here it says sodium lactate, 1%, 2%, 3%. And that's based on your oil weight as well. And I did a video on citric acid in cold process soap making and in liquid soap making, and here it shows you, and this is based on the oil amount as well. It's always based on the oil amount. And here underneath it shows extra light to add to bring it back to equilibrium, which I covered in my citric acid video. Right, so this is really handy here because it does all the calculations for you, obviously, but I just showed in my previous tutorial videos how to do the calculation manually, just in case you don't have access to a light calculator, or it goes down, or whatever happens in the future. If you have the base formulas, then you can just calculate stuff for yourself. I use percentages, so I always use percentages, total oil weight. So instead of doing 700 grams for olive oil, 300 grams for coconut oil, I know my batch size is going to be 1000 grams. So I go ahead and type in 1000 in here, and then over here you put percentages. So I want 70% olive oil, 30% coconut oil. I find working with percentages for this is just so much easier. And that's what I tend to pick. So these values here is exactly what I use for my cold process soap recipe formations. Right, so let's say you wanted to add castor oil. So you go ahead and add castor oil, and then sweet almond oil. Right. So for me personally, my almond recipe, I just lower the olive oil to 60%, and I do 5% each of the castor oil and the sweet almond oil. And all these values on the left stay the same, unless you want to change obviously the super fat, or you want to change your oil weight. And then down here it shows you 600 grams of olive oil, 300 grams of coconut oil, 50 grams of castor oil, and 50 grams of sweet almond oil, and shows you based on 90% purity, 5% super fat, 142.26 grams. And obviously on the right side as well, it shows everything in ounces and in pounds as well. Right, so just delete the castor, the sweet almond, and let's move on to liquid soap. So we change it to KOH, and we change that to 90% because most potassium hydroxide is 90%, and we'll leave that at 1000. And obviously super fat, you'll go 0. This is what I do. You can do Catherine Failer method, right? But I just do in the super fat minus 10, and that's a 10% excess of potassium hydroxide. But for argument's sake, we'll just go ahead and leave it at 0. And for liquid soap, it's not the same as bar soap when it comes to coconut oil. You can go up to 60% coconut oil and it won't dry the skin out, but just for argument's sake, let's do 50-50. And for water, I don't leave it at percentage of oil weight. I mean, you can, but I don't. I usually do water to lye ratio and always go 2-to-1 when it comes to liquid soap. Right, so there we go. 500 grams of olive oil, 500 grams of coconut oil, the lye purity, 90% purity for the potassium hydroxide, 0% super fat, 247.78 grams of potassium hydroxide, and the water 2-to-1 ratio 495.56. I find the 2-to-1 ratio is really good. It provides enough water in the recipe so it doesn't dry out as quick when you're cooking it, and also it remains quite fluid, and the sodium lactate really plays a big part in this as well. It keeps it nice and fluid when you're cooking it, and that's the same for hot process soap making as well. For hot process soap making, for sodium hydroxide, I still go to percentage of oil weight, but I changed to 32. So that's 320 grams per 1,000 grams of oil. So that's what I do for hot process soap making, but for liquid soap making I do 2-to-1, and I find that just works. It's just a sweet spot. It just works really well. Right, so let's go back to sodium hydroxide, and we'll change that back to 99, and then we'll change that back to 5% super fat. Sometimes it's a bit naughty and doesn't change. So I'll change that back to 70, change it back to 30, change that back to 25. Okay, so it's really easy to change the total oil weight as well. So that's what we looked at before, this here. So let's say, I want to make 4 times the batch, or I want to use 4 kilos of oil. So you just type that in 4,000. And then if you go down here, it just does everything for you. 2.8 kilos of olive oil, 1.2 kilos of coconut oil, 569.23 grams of sodium hydroxide, and 1,000 grams of water. And if, your scale, if it's 0.23 or 0.2 whatever number, you can just use the lower number. So for me personally, I would just do 569. So I just don't find an issue with that point extra a little bit. It's not going to make a big difference at all, and you definitely won't feel it or notice any difference in the finished product. And then obviously, because we've changed our oil amount, the sodium lactate 1% obviously is not 10 grams anymore. It's 40 grams because it's 4,000 gram or 4 kilo oil batch, and the same with 2% and the same with 3%. And that's the same also with citric acid. The values change, and actually all the values here will change because it's based on your oil weight and the extra sodium hydroxide needed to neutralize or bring back your soap recipe to equilibrium, and that's the extra you add as well. So with citric acid, obviously you dissolve your lime water first and let it cool down a little bit, and then you add your citric acid, and then it'll bring it back to equilibrium just adding your citric acid. So for example, if I'm going to do 1% citric acid, I will do 569 in my calculator plus 25.25 and dissolve that in the water, and then when all that's dissolved and there's no more steam or anything and it's fully dissolved in the water, then I go ahead and add either for my 1%. If I want 1%, then it would be obviously the 25.5 I added to the 569. Obviously, if I want 2%, it would be 569 plus 50.51 grams, and then I'll add the 80 grams of citric acid. So that's how you kind of work out the amount of extra sodium hydroxide you need, depending on what percentage here you're going with citric acid and how much hard water you have. So that's how you kind of work out how much required for citric acid, and the same with sodium lactate. It goes on based on your oil amount. And the only time I use 2% citric acid if my olive oil content is 90% or higher. Otherwise, I stick to I usually actually stick to 1.2%, just a little bit over 1%. So it just depends like what you're comfortable with and what works for you. Some people use still 1% even if it's 100% olive oil, but you want it to be a little more firm, so I suggest going to 2%. I have tried 3% in the past, even with 100% olive oil, and it didn't go, I can't say that it went too hard because it was still soft after 6 to 8 hours, But when I went to cut it, the edges were really hard and it crumbled, but still inside was soft. So I found 3% did not work. I do not recommend 3%. I recommend nothing over 2%. The only time I recommend over 3% or up to 5%, if you're making your own melt and pour soap base, you can go up to 5%. Or liquid soap, I go up to 5%. But for bar soap, I would never go above 2%. That's just my recommendation based on my experiences with using sodium lactate in cold process soap making. And that's also the same for hot process. I find above 2% also when you go to cut it just makes it more crumbly. So I just stick to 2%, even for hot process soap making. That's just my personal experience. And adding that extra bit of water, because I do a 25% of oil to weight ratio for water batch, I just change that to 32% for hot process soap making. Right, so just to quickly go over dual lye method. So you go over here on the left under lye plus weight and select dual lye checker box, and then under KOH, there you put the percentage of KOH you want in your recipe. So it's just, for argument's sake, go 20%, and then for KOH purity it's obviously 90%, and the percentage of sodium hydroxide 80%, because 20% is potassium hydroxide, and the purity for that is 99. And it goes ahead here and it shows you exactly how much of each lye that you require in your recipe. And I've never done a cream soap, so I don't even know what that does. So let's just click it and see what happens. What's that? Will provide additional water and glycerin requirements. Additional water and glycerin. I have no idea what that does actually. Okay, learn something new every day. I don't think I've ever paid attention to that in the past. Okay, right. Will provide additional water and glycerin. Because I don't see any values here changing when I click that. Anyway, we'll just leave it unchecked. I've never used a dual lye method in cold process soap making. In bar soap making, I have tried it in liquid soap making. So let's go ahead and leave the dual lye as is. So obviously if you're doing liquid soap, the KOH percentage that you're using in your recipe would be maybe 70%. And then the percentage of obviously sodium hydroxide will be 30%. And then down here, because we know it's going to be a liquid soap, then right down here you go to water to lye ratio. Like I mentioned before, I like to work with 2:1 with liquid soap. And then over here on the right, under needed ingredients, the required sodium hydroxide 42.69 grams and the potassium hydroxide 154.43 grams. So this makes it really easy to use a dual lye method. And when you hit dual lye, these disappear where it's under lye type, where you select one or the other, because you're obviously using both. And this is when you know you're going to have to know which portion is going to be higher for liquid soap or bar soap. So obviously for liquid soap, KOH percentage would be 7 and above. I do believe they're usually 8 and above, I think. But yeah, it just depends on what you're after. I know shaving soaps, I think from memory, don't quote me on this because I haven't formulated a shaving cream soap, so I don't know. I'm pretty sure there might be half-half or 60-40 or something like that, because you do want it fairly solid, but you kind of want it a little soft too, so it's easier to lather up when you're circulating your brush, your shaving brush. So I do believe something like that. I guess you just research yourself what kind of recipe you're after, but it's just a quick overview on how to do a dual lye method. It's really easy. This calculator is just really, really easy. And of course over here, we'll just turn off July and we'll go back to bar soap. And go back to that. There's properties here, it shows you here as well, each oil and their properties, so hardness and conditioning. Obviously olive oil is not very hard, it doesn't have any cleansing capabilities, but it's really conditioning, it's really creamy, and it has a fairly low longevity because it does kind of melt away if it's 100% olive oil. Olive oil, even though if it's highly conditioning and not cleansing, it's still soap. And this is the misconception with a lot of people, it still cleans. So don't think that it's at zero, that it doesn't clean. It absolutely does clean. And if you click on coconut oil, obviously the hardness is very high compared to olive oil. And it has, well, we know coconut oil is very cleansing. It has very mild conditioning properties. It's very, very bubbly. And it adds fairly good longevity and creaminess to the bar. And obviously here, depending on the percentage of each oils you're using, it shows you the overall hardness, cleansing, conditioning, and other properties in your cold process soap recipe. And it also shows you the fatty acid profile. I think I will make another video in future regarding fatty acid profile, because it's really important to know each of these and what they are, and the percentages of each as well that you want in your recipe, depending on what you're targeting your recipe for. So I think I will go into detail, because this is a really big topic as well, about all the different fatty acids in carrier oils.
Thanks so much for watching the video. Don't forget to share and like this video and subscribe to my channel, and head on over to my Facebook and Instagram page. Hopefully this tutorial was informative, and I highly recommend you give LikeCalc a try. It's a great online calculator to use to formulate your recipes, especially because of light purity. That's really important. And also, just like this video was suggested by a subscriber of mine, their name's Sarju, as mentioned before. And if you've got any ideas on future videos you'd like me to create or look into, just comment in the comment section. And my previous video with cost pricing and oil density, that was also suggested by another subscriber. Their name's Boop, so thanks to Boop again. So any suggestions, I'm happy to read them, and we'll see if I'll be able to make them into videos, just like this one and the previous one as well. So I really enjoy reading the comments. Thanks to everybody for commenting and all the positive vibes that I've been getting. I really appreciate it. Until next time, happy formulating and happy calculating. Be safe. Bye for now.